You are listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
The Missouri basketball Tigers have won 3 straight basketball games. Hello and welcome into Mizzou That's Who, your podcast for Missouri athletics here on KC Sports Network. I am one of your wonderful co-hosts, Tucker Franklin, as always, joined by Gabe DeArmond, Maggie Johnson. Tigers are on a streak. They've collected a win against Ole Miss, Iowa State, and LSU since the last time we have recorded a podcast. Gabe, how were the vibes in Columbia?
Probably not as good as those in Vegas, if I'm being honest. We haven't done this for like a month and a half because Tucker went to Vegas. But, Missouri hasn't lost since we did it last. So they never miss three-point shots anymore, and they never trail in the second half. So these are good things.
Maggie, I feel like Gabe wants us to shut off the podcast now. He's like, we're not good since our last podcast. Just shut her down now.
We did it. We figured out the algorithm. The matrix has been solved. Then the Missouri Tigers are fixed, and they are back. By the way, 3 wins: one against Ole Miss, one against Iowa State, which was a very good basketball game, and also the LSU game, which we are recording the day after the LSU game. So, a trio of good wins for the Missouri Tigers. Hopefully, getting a little bit more momentum heading into the this final home stretch here. I guess you still got a few more games, but I'd say we're getting into the home stretch of the regular season. It looks like the last regular season game is March 4th. So the beginning of March, we're in the second to last month of the regular season. We'll see. We'll see how the Missouri Tigers go. Well, let's talk about that Iowa State game. Obviously, I think the first thing we have to talk about that Iowa State game is the uniforms that they wore. Gabe, I know you're not a big uniform guy, but we've got to talk about this, Gabe. I'm sorry.
I mean, I don't know who this you talk about it. Look, I'm glad people liked them. They're cool uniforms, but my biggest fear was actually that Missouri would lose to LSU, because then people would be convinced that it was the clothes that won the Iowa State game and the clothes that lost the LSU game, and it was all I would ever be able to talk about the rest of the year.
So you're saying you don't wear the same pair of socks if we win or anything like that? No. I mean, I've done things like, there are certain times, like sometimes you can't, if your team's winning, you can't get up to pee or whatever. I get that. That all makes sense. But I don't think that the jerseys made shots go in on Saturday. I mean, that I could be wrong. I don't know. You guys might be able to prove me differently.
I guess we'll never know. That might be one of the things. It's like the 8th wonder of the world. Do jerseys actually help you perform? K-State is convinced if they wear an alternate helmet, they lose, which was funny because they lost to Tulane in that alternate helmet they did have. But they are convinced that if they wear anything other than the Power Cat, I think they call it Old Glory, which that's for another podcast to talk about. If they wear that helmet, they'll win football games.
Well, the thing about those uniforms, like for people, my age and all that, hey, we all remember those. There was literally not anybody born who's on this team the last time Missouri won. Like, somebody asked Sean East at some point, I don't know if it was after the game or whatever, hey, or I think it was the day before the game, hey, what do you think about the uniforms? And Sean East is like, honestly, I haven't even seen them. I don't know. I've heard people like them. They're cool. So
everyone loves a good throwback.
Yeah.
I mean, like, if we would throw back even to just the football uniforms we wore when Chase Daniel was playing, I think a lot of fans would be very happy. And that's not even that big of a throwback.
But you know why they like those uniforms? Because Missouri was good in. Like, that's the main thing, right? I mean, because those uniforms make people think of Derek Chivas and Javon Crudup and Anthony Peeler and Doug Smith and I mean, all of the best teams in Missouri history up until about 2008 wore those uniforms. And the Chase Daniel uniform, well, yeah, Missouri was number 1 in the country. So it was obviously the clothes. So they need to go back to those clothes.
Well, another funny thing about it is that a lot of people complain about our jerseys right now. They hate the bright yellow. Like, you hear people complain about the bright yellow all the time. What's on those throwback jerseys? The bright yellow. Yeah. A lot of people think that we should go back to like the old gold, like almost the Vandy gold. But I mean, we wore the bright yellow before. People are like, that's not Mizzou's brand, but
I don't like, look, I will play the role that I've been destined to play here. I've literally never gone to a game, and my enjoyment of it has been impacted by what people wear. I truly don't understand.
I like it. I think it looks cool. I have always enjoyed the aesthetics of the game, right? I know it doesn't really impact the play, but as Deion Sanders once said, leader of the 6-6 Buffaloes this year, look good, feel good, play good, something like that. You get the point. You've heard it before. But no, that was really exciting that those uniforms come out. I saw Maggie. I saw you had a few Twitter spats about people saying that they copied Michigan. That was a hot topic around that Missouri copied Michigan and their uniforms, and people didn't know how dates work. That was a little bit of a spat.
I mean, I just tweet something and everybody. I didn't say anything. I just retweet something and people come at me. So I don't know. I didn't put any research into it. I just trusted what other people did, which is probably not always the best move. But based on photos, it looks like Mizzou had them before Michigan, but I cannot confirm.
Well, I think the main difference is that Missouri say Missouri and Michigan say Michigan.
That is a big difference.
I mean,
yeah.
That seems like it doesn't seem like it would be difficult to make that distinction.
It would be a little tricky, though.
If you were literate.
Yes. It would be tricky, though, if Missouri came out in a Michigan uniform and said, hey, what's going on here?
It
would be a little fishy.
It
would be a little fishy if they did that. But they came out, had a good game against number 12 Iowa State at the time, and 78-61. And they had 4 Tigers in double digits. Kobe Brown dropped 20 points with 12 rebounds, both of which were game highs. And that's the second double-double of the year. DeMoy Hodge chipped in 17 points with the team leading 4 assists. So some good performances from the Tigers. Gabe, as you mentioned, they couldn't miss a three-pointer.
They're 43 for 87 in the last 3 games. Apparently 43 over a 3-game span is a school record. They're on pace to shoot more than they've ever shot in a season, and when they're going in, that's great. I thought the part about Saturday was the Big 12 SEC Challenge, and at the time the game ended, Missouri was the only SEC team that had won. Yeah. It seemed kind of appropriate to me, like, hey, this is what we expected 9 years ago, right? Missouri's going to carry the SEC in basketball. But that was, I don't know if it was their best win of the season, but it was up there. I mean, Iowa State was top 10-ish in rankings and metrics and things like that. And I do think people kind of maybe who don't pay attention as much to the Big 12 Missouri fans as they used to don't understand like how good that league is and how big that win is. I mean, Iowa State was leading the conference, and it like you will not find anybody who doesn't say it's the best conference in college basketball by a long shot. And so I think that is one, like at the end of the year, one of the biggest things the committee is going to look at is, can you beat other teams that we put in this field? Well, Iowa State's in it. Mm-hmm. Kentucky, probably in it. Arkansas, probably in it. Illinois, definitely in it. So Missouri's now got kind of a handful of games that when that committee looks at what number do we put next to you, oh, like, hey, you've beaten these teams that are going to be playing here, and that's a big deal.
And Iowa State, so they were kind of tied at the top. I think by the time we played them, I think they were tied with Kansas State and they were tied with Texas, but they had the tiebreaker over both of them, which put them at the top. People don't realize that they beat Kansas State days before we beat them. And Kansas State is a good basketball team. Yes, they just went to Lawrence and kind of got manhandled a little bit, which you kind of expect whenever you go to Fog Allen. But that's still, like, Kansas State's still a good basketball team, and the team we just beat very decidedly so. I mean,
it was not close.
It was not close. Right. But we went out there and competed, and I think that that's really good going into the really tough away games that we have. Like, we have at Auburn, we have at Tennessee. I think those are flopped. I think we play at Tennessee first. But, I mean, we've got some tough games. So I think going into that game and being confident, knowing that they can shoot the ball is really good to end the season before we go to the tournament, the SEC tournament.
Right. And we talked about the Alabama team in the Alabama game, how they're so good about ending the first half on a run and starting the second half on a run. That's what Missouri did in this game. Came out in the second half. They hit 6 for 6 from the field. They had 10 trade shots to finish the first half and to start the second. So big for Missouri to do that, and it really changes the momentum for that game. Then they turned a 30-26 lead into a 58-39 lead and early in that second half. So big win for the Tigers. Again, Maggie, it's a really great point. I was with BJ Kissel as we were heading out to Las Vegas for the East-West Shrine Bowl, and he was watching that Kansas State-Iowa State game, which was a battle for the top of the Big 12 at the time. A very competitive basketball game. It was a good game. And I kept thinking, oh my goodness, Missouri has to play this Iowa State team next. Like this is going to be a really tough game. And then I remember telling BJ Kissel, I said, "Oh, Missouri beat Iowa State by 17." And he said, "Really? Like, wait, really? Missouri beat them by 17?" I was like, "Yeah, no, they did." Again, it comes down to a lot of times home court advantage was probably played a big factor in this. I don't think the officiating was all terrible. I think there was actually good officiating, but can't say that very often. But I will say, sold out Mizzou Arena is pretty nice to play in front of for these guys.
Yeah, it's turned into a really tough place to play. I mean, even LSU last night, it was definitely, you could tell a difference between that crowd and the other crowds, but there were still 12,100 and something, which, over the last 7-8 years, Missouri would have killed for that kind of crowd. And now that's the down night as far as attendance goes. But the Iowa State game was really, and this is what I wrote after the game, was, okay, this is an NCAA tournament. Like, this is what we're talking about now. And look, the term lock, like, you're not a tournament lock until you reach the point where you can lose every game on the rest of your schedule and still get in. And Missouri's not there yet. But they beat LSU. You would expect they'll beat LSU again. They've got South Carolina. Like, if they just beat the really bad teams on their schedule, they're going to get in. And if you looked at Missouri's schedule, that Iowa State game kind of ended a 10-game run where you looked and said, that's about as tough a run as anybody's going to have in the country. I mean, it was, Kansas, Illinois, Arkansas again, Kentucky. There was the breather in there was probably Ole Miss, and that was a road game. Now, the last 10 games of the season, other than those 2 road games Maggie just mentioned, I mean, hey, they're at Starkville on Saturday, and by no means is that a gimme. Texas A&M comes here, and by no means is that a gimme, but these games are all theoretically easier than most of the previous 10 have been.
If Des Moines Hodge, and we talked about this last week, we said Des Moines Hodge has to shoot better, which he has.
He did.
Yeah. A lot better in the past 3 games. 3 games. But we said that. And if he can go on the road and he can do that, I mean, you shouldn't lose those games. I'm not saying that they won't happen. I mean, I thought LSU was the ultimate trap game. They hadn't won. I think they'd lost like 8 in a row. They come to your home court.
They're bad.
But they weren't that bad at the beginning of the season. So you know that they have flashes of good play. I don't remember what team they beat at the beginning of the season, but they had a couple pretty good wins. Those are wins you have to have. And with those games coming up, home against Texas A&M, South Carolina, those are just wins that you have to get. You can't do what you did at Texas A&M, which is lose by 20. You can't do that and still expect to be a lock. I don't know about you. I don't want to be an 8 or 9. And almost every single tournament bracket, I see us in the 8 or 9 spot. I would rather either the 7 or the 10, if I'm being perfectly honest.
I think they moved up a little, and it's a little bit of like beggars can't be choosers, right? I mean, at this point, getting in is, hey, you'll take what you get. But like that A&M game, here's the other thing about Missouri is not only have they beaten teams in the tournament, they do not have anything that even approaches being a bad loss. Right. Texas A&M is 3rd in the SEC right now. They're 7-2 in this league. Florida's 6-3 coming off a win over Tennessee. Those are, I think for some reason, a lot of Missouri fans just kind of think, well, we should never lose to that team, or we should never lose to this team. But those are not bad losses. I mean, those are losses a lot of teams in this league have already taken. It just so happened, again, that Missouri played them on the road at a time where Missouri was slumping a little bit. But they've come back, and it's Hodge. And I think it's time to start looking at Kobe Brown as SEC Player of the Year.
Mm.
Like I think that is a distinct possibility at this point.
I think he should be, and he's only made better by having Isaiah Mosley and by having Diarra. He plays better when he has those guys, and also there's not as much pressure on him whenever he has players like Diarra in there. Diarra can come in, he can take up a few fouls. He's not. You've noticed over the past few games, he's not playing in that foul trouble as much as he was, 5 or 6 games ago.
Mm-hmm.
And Kobe, I mean, he was 10 for 11 against LSU, and he is all of a sudden, and this is kind of where I think Missouri fans will start to get nervous. Like, I've never thought he was a good enough shooter to play in the NBA. All of a sudden, he's like a 45% three-point shooter.
Yeah.
And I've said this on a few different places this week. Don't wish away. Don't skip this year thinking about what next year is going to be, right? Like, worry. Your goal, honestly, is that Kobe and Isaiah are so good the rest of this year that they do leave, because then that's a good thing for you. I understand wanting them back, but I'm getting questions every week about, well, who's coming back, and I'm like, guys, if you're not following this, like, you are missing. We were talking last night on Press Row. It's just fun to go to games now. Like, This team is incredibly fun to watch, even inevitably, their season is at some point going to end, and you're going to be disappointed because it was 92-90, and how the last game of the year is going to go, right? But they're just fun as hell to watch. I mean, they go out there, and like I wrote after the LSU game, if it's your first time seeing this team, you go, oh my God, that's a bad shot. Oh my God, what do you do? Slow down. What do you do?
Yeah.
No, that's how they play, and it's really, really fun.
You mentioned Kobe in the LSU game, 26 points, 10 of 11 field goals, 5 of 6 from 3-point range. So incredible night for him. And Maggie, you also mentioned Diarra, Mosley, both of those guys being able to come in and play and get minutes and contribute in those minutes has been huge for this team. They were kind of running into some problems there when we saw them. I don't really want to say it was a losing skid. It was during the tough part of their schedule. They lost back-to-back games. And it was really they were staring down the barrel of a 4-game losing streak, really, before they beat Arkansas at home. And when they had Diarra, they had Mosley come in, give valuable minutes, give good contributions. That was really when you're like, okay, well, that kind of does free up Kobe, to your point, to maybe play a little bit freer if you have a guy that can come in there and take a little bit of the load off. So it's been good to see from this team. And that LSU game as you mentioned, Gabe, 43 3-pointers. Converting 13 against LSU in the last 3 games. Season high 26 assists also in this game, and they only had 10 turnovers. And when we talked about this all year, Missouri is going to get out-rebounded, but if they can win, assists, if they can limit turnovers, if they can win turnovers, that's how they're going to win basketball games comfortably like they did. And I think taking care of the ball and doing what they did in this game is kind of the recipe for this team to really be doing it.
I think we're number 1 in the country in turnover margin, which
that's good.
We're on the right side of it. I'd much rather be on that side, I'll tell you that.
And if you
pass some of that over across Providence, Eli Drinkwitz is saying, right?
Yeah, golly. I was looking at the KenPom before we hopped on. I got it pulled up here. They're 50th in KenPom, but they're still 3rd in adjusted offense. Like they're scoring the basketball at an unreal clip, and I think that's good for this team, obviously. A shocker. Breaking analysis here that being 3rd in the country in offense is good. But 188th in an adjusted defense, which has gone up since the season started, but still not by much.
I mean, their defense isn't great, but, this team, they've got 7 guys. I looked up last night. They've got 7 guys averaging 8 points or more. The records we have access to only go back to 1958. They've never had 7 guys average 8 points over a full season. Wow. They've had 6 a few times, but they've never had 7. And so what it does is, like on any given night, Mo Diarra went from being like the guy everybody was talking about to he played 5.5 minutes against Iowa State. Or Dre Golston had a couple games where he just didn't get off the bench in the second half because Gates didn't like the way he was playing. Last night, he said Isaiah Mosley, he thought wasn't getting some calls and didn't handle that very well. So Isaiah didn't play a lot down the stretch last night. But basically the point is Kobe's going to be there every single night.
Yeah.
And then You just need 2 or 3 of the other guys to show up. And some nights it's going to be Sean East and Drake Olston and Isaiah Mosley. And some nights it's going to be Noah Carter and Demoy Hodge. Doesn't have to be the same guy every night. They have enough guys that you can, you can usually piecemeal together enough to win. But it all centers around Kobe, which is, he is a different player than he's ever, like, he's improved every year, but the leap this year has been unbelievable.
We're very similar to Kentucky in a way where they rely so much on Oscar Tshiebwe, and Kentucky's played better, I would say, than they were early in the conference.
Oh yeah,
they've been winning some games. They competed with Kansas in that game for most of the game. We're very similar, except I do feel like we have more pieces around Kobe than Kentucky has around Oscar. And they might have more stars, like more talent, but they're young. Experience really does go so far. Like, I've said this as a Mizzou fan for years. Like, you go to you watch football games, you go to basketball games, and you're like, oh, if we just had one more year with this guy. Because they're playing, with the younger guys. But now you, have all of those experienced guys. I feel like it's a perfect storm to go into the SEC tournament, hopefully get a couple of wins, and then lead with positive momentum going into the NCAA tournament.
It struck me last night listening to the starting lineup. Senior, graduate, senior in Missouri's starting 5. Ken Palm actually tracks that. The average experience on this roster is 3.03 years, which means the average player on this team is older than a junior. It's the 15th most experienced team in the country. So, they're new here, but they're not new to basketball. That said, it's still, because I think we talked about this coming into the year, all the optimists, those people existed last year. I mean, you remember, hey, this guy from Ball State, I think I really like this. Hey, the guy from Wisconsin, Green Bay, he's got some skills that are going to, and the difference is none of those guys last year really translated to this level. And most of the guys if you saw Demoy Hodge and you said, well, hey, he was one of the Horizon League's best players, so I think he's going to be one of the SEC's best players, then more power to you. You're either lying or you're the most blind optimist in the history of Missouri basketball, because I don't think anybody could have seen this coming. And I tried to ask Dennis the other day, I was like, when you go out and you're looking at all these guys from this lower level, is there some quality that you're looking for that tells you they can translate to this level? And he said, well, I can't give away my secrets. And then he talked for 2.5 minutes about something that had nothing to do with what I asked. So I learned nothing about what he found, what he saw.
Right.
Well, you wouldn't look at Nick Honor and be like, oh yeah, I bet that dude's a baller. Nick Honor, he's got one of the, he barely turns the ball over. It's exactly what you want of a point guard.
Right. And he is better here than he was at Clemson. Yeah. I mean, if you look at the numbers and the way he's played, he's better here than he was there. And, all of them, hey, he took guys that, and people take it as an insult when, I've said a number of times, the pieces don't say they should be this good. Right. And people, I'm not saying these guys aren't good players or anything like that, but nobody saw this coming. I mean, nobody thought we would be talking February 1st, talking about all the wheels are going to have to fall off at once for them to miss the tournament.
Yeah, that's not something I expected to be talking about at this point of the year. And you guys mentioned those. Noah Carter, DeAndre Golson both had 14 points. Isaiah Mosley had 12 in the LSU game. Great effort in both of these games. They again traveled to, I believe, Starkville, correct?
Starkville.
Yeah, they traveled to Starkville on Saturday to take on Mississippi State, who ranks in the bottom third of the SEC. It won't be an easy game by any means. No road game in the SEC is easy, and if it starts after 8 p.m., it's going to be a tough one.
Well, these 2 weeks are like the Mizzou basketball revenge tour. I mean, They never freaking win in Oxford, and they did that. Do you guys know the last time they beat LSU?
In basketball?
Oh, Lord.
Kim Anderson's first SEC game.
Yeah.
They beat LSU at Mizzou Arena, and they were 1-0 in the SEC, and we were all kind of like, I don't know, maybe this isn't going to be as bad as we thought it was going to be. No, it wasn't.
It was very bad. One thing to remember about Mississippi State as well is that they just were one of the other other two teams, I guess, that did win their Big 12 matchup, and they beat a pretty good TCU team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, you just came off a win against Kansas State a couple weeks ago. I mean, they've not been as good as I think they were 3 weeks ago, but they're still a good team. So definitely not going to write off going to Starkville this weekend.
And this is the ultimate, like, Mississippi State probably can't win a game if it gets to 70. Yeah. And Missouri can't win a game unless it gets to 70, right? So just start there. Just if Missouri gets to 70, they're going to win the game.
Fair. Yeah, I like it. They do have, I think I counted up 9 games. We were talking in the middle of the season, 20 games is looking like that, like nice little sweet spot there that you could really start to feel comfortable. Listen, they only got to win 3 more to get to 20 games. Obviously, you want to win as many as you can. Looking at the schedule, it is pretty favorable outside of at Tennessee and at Auburn, as Maggie mentioned earlier. But excited to see what Mizzou basketball can muster up here as they go to Mississippi State on Saturday, February the 4th. That's a 5 p.m. kickoff. And then they will host South Carolina on Tuesday. That is a 8 p.m. tip-off on the SEC network.
Last 8 p.m. home game, Tuesday night. Thank God.
Well, and I don't blame, like yesterday, we were talking about the crowd. It was a little bit less. Okay, I've said this. I think there's enough people in the city of Columbia that we should be able to fill that arena no matter what. But
they're getting close.
They're getting close, but I do understand, like, seeing more empty seats at an 8 p.m. game. I mean, I'm not coming in town for that. I get home at 1 a.m. I understand going to Kansas City and St. Louis not wanting to make that trip on that Wednesday.
I live like 1.2 miles from the arena, and I didn't want to go to the 8 p.m. game, right? And I get paid to go there, and I won't. But nobody can knock in Missouri fans at all for attendance in either sport this year. I mean, this has kind of proven what the Missouri fans have always said: give them something to care about, and they're going to go. It's like most fan bases, right? And they have something to care about, and they're showing up. It's a tough place to play. You can go enrich your child's vocabulary a little bit at every game. You can hear a good song, and everything's good.
Yeah, kids
have absolutely killed it. I will say that. Over the years, I've been hard on Mizzou student sections, especially the past 8 years. There's nothing negative I can even say about how they've shown up, changed the environment, because it's on them. They're the ones that are getting the crowd involved.
And it's easy for us to say, I mean, obviously different eras, but like Missouri, my senior year in high school, Missouri was a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. And so I was coming in and I'd grown up watching great basketball, and then they got Corby and Devin my junior year in football. And so we had something to show. Maggie, you've talked about a lot. When you were at Mizzou was the time that probably the best time, if you combine both sports, that there's ever been. Like, why would these kids have shown up? They've had absolutely no reason in either sport to show up the entire time they've been in college, plus 2 years where they weren't even allowed to show up. So, anybody that has crapped on Missouri students the last few years, like, take that somewhere else.
I'm with that. Go take that. Take that to the bank and cash it. We do have a bit of football news. We don't have to touch on it for too long, but Missouri is hiring to Eli Drinkwitz's staff former record-breaking running back Brock Olivo as a special teams analyst. Brock Olivo last coached as Washington University in St. Louis. He was a tight ends coach in 2022. But before that, he was the running backs coach for the Philadelphia Stars in the USFL. He was also in Italy. Chicago Bears assistant special teams coordinator in 2018-2019. Also special teams for Denver and Kansas City, Carolina. So he has some experience in the special teams department in the NFL as well. So the last time the Missouri Tigers hired a former NFL coach, it did not go wrong. So this can't go wrong here.
Brock, he is an analyst. He is not going to be in charge of an entire side of the ball. But like Brock and I were in school together. He graduated a year ahead of me, and he was like the poster child for the renaissance of Missouri football. I mean, it was when we were in school, Missouri hadn't been to a bowl game for so long, and I don't even think Brock would object to this. He was a tryhard, right? He was this kid that everybody said, what are we doing? He would be a 2-star kid that everybody on the message board would be pissed off Missouri gave a scholarship, who ended up leaving as the school's all-time leading rusher through very little more than effort and work ethic, to be quite honest, because he was it's not insulting to say he was like the 4th best running back on those teams, because they had Ernest Blackwell and Devin West and Corby Jones at quarterback. But he had 3,000 yards when he left here, and it's cool for him to come back. I mean, I don't want anybody to be under the impression that like next season performance is based on Brock Olivo's role as the special teams analyst or anything, but it's a cool story.
You like having people come back. Like, I love having Phil Pressey on the sidelines. I mean, he was a part of a lot of what we remember the good days of Mizzou basketball to be Sam's Norfolk State. But yeah, I mean, you like seeing that, and you like knowing that they want to be back at their alma mater too. Like, I just feel as a fan, it kind of just like melts your heart a little bit, because you love Mizzou, you want them to love Mizzou too, and you don't see it all of the time. You don't see a lot of alumni athletes really involved. So I'm excited to have him back. We'll see.
Hey, are we going to do like on location NCAA tournament podcast? Is that going to happen?
Possibly. Depends on when I go.
Albany, New York.
Go to the Carrier now.
If you got Des Moines, that'd be pretty cool.
Oh yeah, Des Moines wouldn't be a bad one. I haven't even.
Des Moines, Denver, and Columbus would be cool. Anything else would.
Columbus is very cool.
No, it's not cool. I mean, Des Moines not cool. I'm not trying to piss off all our huge fans in Iowa, but nobody's ever said Des Moines is cool, but it's drivable.
Well, yeah, I haven't even looked at the locations. I believe, does Kansas City have like a semifinal this year, or
they have the Midwest Regional? So like the second week is in Kansas City.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. I'll have to do more research into that. I don't know if you guys know this. Chiefs are in the Super Bowl.
I've heard.
Yeah. Breaking news. But so that's been occupying a lot of my time.
I'm going to get in trouble for that being mentioned on this podcast. I'm not allowed to acknowledge.
Oh, that's true. Sorry, Gabe. You can't talk about the Chiefs. You only can talk about Mizzou contractually, and that's fair. I'd also like to give a shout out to Charlie Hustle, outfitting us as always with our sweet shirts. Make sure you go check them out, charliehustle.com. Get Mizzou. You can get Chiefs if you want to, or you could just get a nice Charlie Hustle shirt like Gabe has on there. They've got all kinds of stuff for you. All kinds of stuff for you at Charlie Hustle. So anything else before we get out of here? I think we hit all of it. I think we did.
Yeah, we did everything in 35 minutes. This is record breaking for us.
We did really well.
There were a lot of people asking me, they're like, did you guys cancel your podcast? I'm like, okay, we only didn't do it on Monday. It's not like we didn't do it for multiple days. I completely blame Tucker. So
it's my fault.
I took zero accountability or responsibility for that. Tucker's fault, 100%.
Should have. It was my fault 100%. I was in a car. So
I don't know what the hell you guys were doing. I sat here for an hour at 2:30 on Monday and waited for Tucker to send me a link, but he was in Mandalay Bay, tripling his travel budget or something.
Gabe called me pissed off, just screaming at me, yelling and screaming. A lack of communication. No. We appreciate you guys listening all the way to the end of the podcast. Appreciate you sticking with us through the schedule change. We'll be back probably usual time next week. I'll say we will be back usual time because there's a Tuesday game. So we'll have the Monday podcast before the Tuesday game, and we'll get you ready for that week of basketball. Chiefs win the Super Bowl. Sorry, my schedule might change a little bit, but you guys are just going to have to deal with it. So until next time, we will talk to you later.